Good morning, and to our friends joining us abroad, good evening. I am your host, Christy Eidelhuber. Welcome to Mirage Talks. Today, we touch on the topic human-centered innovation for successful problem solving. We bring to you UX research, design, and strategy, and a human-centered innovation facilitator, Sivana Sherlag. Today, please get together a pen and pencil. Sivana is going to be providing practical tools that you do not want to miss. Sivana, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, let's get started.
Okay, so thank you for the warm introduction. And I join Christy's recommendation to bring a pen and paper because I really want you to come out of this talk with practical tools that you can use starting tomorrow morning. So it would be really beneficial for you. So without further ado, let me introduce myself. My name is Sivana, and like Christy mentioned, I'm a human-centered innovation facilitator. I've been doing this through workshops, design thinking, design sprints, and other methods that you might have heard of. I've been sharing the knowledge through talks, lectures, say like this one, and teaching in different academy establishments. I've been mostly untangling complex problems with teams that I work with in order to create innovation solutions. And on top of all that, I'm also a podcaster, a community leader, and a proud mother for two amazing girls who are also ASD, which is autism diagnosed. So thank you for having me this evening. Now, when I talk about untangling complex problem, this idea or notion might seem a bit big and wide and very vague. So let's break it down before we dive into the conversation. So essentially, a complex problem is a problem that you may encounter in various different places in your life, in a personal level or in a professional domain. And it usually applies to these three rules. One, a variety of people experience it. Two, a variety of solutions could help solve it. And three, a variety of expertise or people are required to create those variety of solutions. So let's see some example. For example, in the education system, a teacher who's tackling the complex problem of preventing bullying in the school is a complex problem because it impacts a variety of people. It requires maybe a variety of solutions, and it requires a variety of people to help solve this. The same goes to healthcare if we want to improve a process that patients are going through in a clinic. Or in even a more business-oriented private sector domain, if we want to reduce the calls to the customer support center and improve the efficiency of the workers by doing so. So a complex problem is really any of those problems or different other problems. And throughout this conversation, I'm going to walk you through a specific problem. So just so you'll have examples of what it really means. So I want to talk to you today about, for example, this fine example of a problem that maybe you've encountered, the long, long lines in the airport where you're trying to get to your flight, but you need to stand for God knows how long in order to get to the check-in or the security check. So imagine that we're a company that's running the airport and we want to reduce the wait times at the airport to provide a better experience. So let's first define whether it's a complex problem in the first place. So it does impact a variety of people who experience it because all the people that come to the airport are very varied and come from different places and with different agendas. We have a variety of solutions that could help us solve it, from technology to service. And we have a variety of expertise or people to create solutions. So when we talk about complex problems, it really can meet us everywhere. Now, I've been helping teams for the past 16 years to solve, define, untangle complex problems. And I noticed that when you try to tackle a complex problem, you usually encounter the same problems or challenges. There's always decisions that had to be made. that have to be made. You have to make a lot of decisions whether to perform to do it for this audience or that audience, to do it for it with this technology or that technology, to do it in for short term, long term. What's your business model? There are so many questions and decisions that you have to do in the process of solving a complex problem, and most of those problems or decisions really come from the question of resources. It depends on the time that you have, the financial funds that you have, resources, the human resources that you have. Can the people that work with me and my team can perform or solve this problem in a meaningful and professional way? And when we're talking about people, then when solving complex problems that requires different people and different professionalities in the table, that means a lot of different agendas are in the table. And tackling each and every one of these problems on its own is a huge challenge. So what I want to offer you today is a way of looking at these problems or on a complex problem and having clarity and focus. And that's what you're going to get today from the tools that I used and I found that are very, very beneficial, helpful, and reduce a lot of stress and anxiety by creating that clarity and focus and helping people to make decisions in a lighter way. So we're going to talk about two thinking models that will help you build a structure for using the 4 practical tools that I'm going to teach you today. Let's dive right in. Oh, and those tools are not something that I just came up with, although some of them I did adopt and altered a bit, but most of these tools are used by the biggest companies, the largest organizations, and even government organizations throughout the world, across the world, and they're proving to be validated and effective. So I invite you to open your mind and take them under consideration when you tackle a complex problem. So let's talk about the thinking models. The first one is divergent and convergent thinking. Some of you might already know it. So for those of you who don't, divergent means that we're in an exploration mode. When we start something, when we initiate a process of untangling a complex problem, we want to first approach the problem and all the information that we're gathering for that problem with an open mind. Some might call it a beginner's mindset. We know nothing. We absolutely have no information that can assist us in decision making. We have no solution yet, and we want to gather information. And it's all about quantity over quality. And if you think about it as a metaphor, think about it like being detectives in a way, collecting evidence and collecting possible potential criminals that you want to investigate or potential crime places, crime scenes, and you want to gather as much information that you can in order to make a decision. And when we move, after we've gathered a lot of information and insights and ideas, we want to think analytically and narrow down and try to focus on what's the right course of action, what's the proper way to go, what's the most feasible, actionable, doable thing that we need to tackle next. And that's kind of like narrowing down all the people that are irrelevant to the crime and finding the perpetrator of the crime and putting him in jail, for example. So in this phase, it's all about quality over quantity. And when I say that these methods are being used, I wanted to show you an example of how Intuit, which are the owners of MailChimp, QuickBooks, and other amazing tools, they even created a guidebook for their entire company so that people in every single department will have a way of this is how we do things. And one of the biggest, the most extensive methods that they've developed around that divergent convergent thinking is the go broad and go narrow method. And they even have tools that they allow people to use in order to implement these methods and this kind of thinking mindset. Now, the second model is human-centered thinking. And what it essentially means is bringing in the users or the customers or the people that we're solving the problem to at the beginning of the process, right at the beginning, before we start creating the solution, before we even know what the solution could be, and involving them throughout the process. Bring it, and whenever we have something to show, we show it to them to get their insights and thoughts and feedback. So I want to tell you about an example of a case study that was done a few years ago. I assume everyone knows what this is, but for those of you who don't, this is an MRI machine, and it's usually not a very fun experience. You have to sit still, lie still for 45 minutes. You go into the machine, it makes a lot of noise, and you have to remain silent and still for a whole 45 minutes. For an adult, it's a very hard experience. So imagine what it would be like for a kid. And that's the brief or the request that Doug Dietz and his company, GE, the company where he works, was given to solve the complex problem that they were given to solve, to create an MRI that is designated for examining kids. Now, they worked tirelessly for 3 years or so, and they've created this amazing machine you see on the right side. And they even won prizes on it. And it was really brilliant. And when Doug went to the hospital to see how people react to it, he got really good feedbacks from the staff, from the professional teams that were working with the machine. But when he crossed the hall and he saw a kid outside of the examination room, he saw something a bit different. He saw a girl that was not willing to go into the examination, no matter what her parents or the medical staff surrounding her tried to do. She was crying. She was very, very frustrated. And not only she was frustrated, her parents were frustrated as well because they couldn't solve this. Now, this is a very intense moment for everyone because you're waiting for a long time to get an appointment for an MRI. So it amounts to a really intense moment. And when he tried to understand that better from the hospital's perspective or the clinic's perspective, he got the understanding that not only this impacts the people that were actually going into the examination, it was impacting the business side as well, because 80% of the children who were entering the evaluation were required to enter under anesthesia. So that meant delays in the process, schedules being rescheduled because they were delayed. It created frictions with the staff and the parents and the people that coming, and obviously with the kids, medication spent and more and more and more. And so it was business damaging as well. So what he decided to do is to go in a process and rethink the problem. And he took a bunch of experts, a group of experts from the hospital itself, people treating the kids and people running them through the examination. And he also teamed up with manager of a museum for kids, the person you see on the top left. And together they explored the kids themselves. They went to kindergartens and reevaluated what those kids actually need. And what they found was that approaching kids through imagination not only opens them up to new activities or reduces their stress levels, it also reduces their anxiety levels from a psychological standpoint. So by getting that understanding, by focusing on the users, they changed this into this. Now, usually what happens is that people gasp for a second. It's like, but then they start thinking, oh, but wait, it's just stickers. But actually it's not, because it seems like a visual aesthetic kind of patch that was added to the MRI, but it was way deeper than that. They created different stories, and each room was designated with a world of imagination. And not only that, when the kids got their appointment scheduled, they got a letter describing the world that they're going to go through a story, and they could see the story, add their names to the story, and play the story together with the staff who joined them at the session of the examination. They actually jumped together on the stones that were painted on the floor in order to play getting to the boat that they were going to travel. Now, this is really innovation and really exciting, but there were two interesting things that happened after that. One thing is that Doug returned to the hospital and he heard a girl say, after coming out of this kind of room, "Can we come back tomorrow?" Which is a huge difference, right? I'm assuming you're saying, yes, it is. But the most important thing from our perspective, because we are trying to get a valuable and meaningful impact, was the business value. So I told you earlier that the number of kids who required an anesthesiologist to come and help them get into the room were 80%. It dropped from 80% to less than 1%. And that means fewer delays, fewer frictions, less medication spent, and more. So the bottom line of being human-centered and bringing the customers first is that it creates better ROI. And now we're going to talk about some practical tools. And for that, if you haven't got the pen and paper or prepared your mobile phone to take a picture, I highly recommend doing it now because you'll need it. You'll use it. So let's talk about the practical tools themselves. And these are tools that I've been working with many different types of entrepreneurs, but they all align to the same cause. They help us untangle complex problems, but by literally solving us, giving us answers to questions that we have in our minds. For example, who are we solving this for? What do we think that we know about them? Our assumptions. How do we make sure that our assumptions are correct, that we're really targeting the people that we need to, that we're really pointing to the right direction, that we're solving the actual problem? And finally, what exactly are we solving? These are the tools that you're going to get. So the first one is one of my favorites. It's called the Players Map. If you look at Google, you can also find it under Stakeholders Map. It's a visualization tool to strategically identify the human involved in the process. And it's not only humans, it's also the organizations, the competition, the departments that may be relevant. But at the end of the day, in all of these groups or organizations or companies, you're still going to work with people. You're still going to need to convince people. So mapping those out initially at the beginning of a process is very beneficial. So it's pretty simple. You take an A4 paper and you just draw 3 circles. And in the middle, you put the primary people that you're actually solving the problem to. In the middle circle, you put the secondary, the people who will be impacted by this solution in the secondary way, not directly, or might help you solve this problem. And in the third circle, you put the ecosystem, the partners, the people who are decision makers, the people who might fund this, or the people who might block this, regulation, whatever is relevant to your solution or to your problem that we're trying to solve. Now, let's take for a second as an example, reducing the time spent in lines in airports. So for example, the people that we're trying to solve this problem to is mostly and primarily the people traveling through airport, right? The people here in this picture. And in the circle that's surrounding it, we want to think about the professional staff, the ground crew, the service providers, all the people that can help us get to the solution or will be impacted by the solution. And in the outer circle, it could be any number of things. It could be government agencies, it could be customs and border protection, regulation, finance, legal, whatever is relevant to your complex problem. This is what you place here. So I just want you to quickly have every time that I'm showing a summary of the tool that you can take a picture of, you'll see an icon on the right side. So you can feel free to take a screenshot of this page, because this is kind of like the summary of everything that I just talked about. And I'm moving forward. So the second tool we're going to talk about is, what do we think we know about our users or about our people that we're trying to solve a problem to? And one of my absolute favorite tools that I use is the proto-personas. Now, they're just initial drafts. There's just initial concept visualizations of who are those people that we just discussed in the middle circle. And we want to expand our understanding about them and to see what do we think we know about them. And we want mostly to create a mutual understanding and alignment, because usually when we're solving a complex problem, we're doing it with other people. So we want to have that mutual understanding, because if I'd ask you, for example, to think about a pink elephant, I'm going to wait a second till everyone's have like an image of a pink elephant in their minds. And if I'd ask you to open your cameras, don't, it's okay. But if I'd ask you to open your cameras and let's have a discussion about that elephant, we'd probably have very different opinions, perspectives, notions about what this pink elephant would look like or behave or what they need, but if I show you a pink elephant, now we can talk about something that we're all aligned around and we're all focusing on the same thing, and we can have a more productive discussion about that. So that's why proto-persona is such an effective tool in my view. So how does it go? I truly believe in really low-tech solutions. Although I'm a very high-tech person, I really believe in A4 paper and pen. So taking at the beginning of a process, after you have your stakeholders or player map figured out, and you know who the primary audience for your solution is, you know what the problem is that you're trying to solve, you take an A4 paper, and you fold it twice and unfold it, and then you create 4 sections. And in each section, I'm going to walk you through what should be there. So for name and sketch, you should probably have your personas, characteristics, and sketch. And don't worry, you can go Picasso, go crazy. You don't have to be like a perfect drawer, painter. No one is really interested or care about your artistic capabilities at this point. We just want to have the pink elephant. We want to understand what you have in your vision in your mind. And we also would like to see demographic details. What are their age or age range? Where are they located in the world? Or if you're working in a country, in a specific city, where are they? What's their occupation, education? Are they tech savvy? If you put them in front of a computer, in front of a technical system, would they be able to work with it, or would they have difficulties? And of course, disabilities or challenges like color blindness or hearing disabilities or visual disabilities, which people don't usually include when they think about solutions, but it's really important, especially for people like me with ADHD. I think that not enough solutions, digital solutions, are created with the understanding that a lot of people have ADHD these days. And it's really important to address that and to prevent people from doing mistakes, which, if you are ADHD as I am, we make them all the time. And also attitudes. For in this context, in the problem that we're trying to solve for them, what do they want to achieve? What are they trying to get when they enter this solution, or when they tackle this problem? What are their values? What's important to them? And the frustration, what makes them the angriest? What makes them like really annoyed or frustrated? And what do they do? How do they use tech daily? How do they currently solve the problem? Or where do they seek information? Is it from their friends or from platform on their mobile phone? So we want to explore what we think we know, and the deeper we go, the better we get results afterwards. Now, for example, Emma, the traveling CEO of our, as a person who's traveling through our airport, where we're trying to reduce the time spent on lines, she's a mid-30 person. She travels around, so she doesn't have like a really specific location that she describes herself a part of. She's a CEO, so she holds an MBA. She's highly tech savvy, and like me, she has ADHD. And we want to map out the people that we solve the problem for with all their attitudes, behaviors to get a better picture. Now, I want you to take a picture of this because this is a good example of what to include or ways to phrase it. There is no right or wrong. For me, it's quantity over quality. This is the divergent phase that we want to expand, throw everything we have in our minds and just keep them going in order to have like a very wide range of ideas and thoughts and concepts. And it helps us achieve when we do that. And when we take 3 to 4 pages and try to bring different characters into the story, maybe this is Emma, maybe it's someone else, maybe it's Bruce who's traveling with his kids. And we try to bring different personas and different stories. Then many times when we do it with a team, we find similarities. So we find that every single one of us thought about a specific character. And if we all thought about the same character, whether her name is the same or not, it doesn't really matter, but it's the same characteristics and we see like the similarities in her behavior, in her goals, then we might focus on that person because we all as a team trying to solve this problem thought that this is our primary person that we're trying to address a problem for. So it creates alignment. And a second thing that I noticed when working with teams is that, and this is something that I usually see with B2B products, business to business, like companies developing complex SaaS platforms for professionals, like dashboards and stuff like that. I usually see a differentiation between the people who are hands-on on the product and the people who decide to purchase it, the people who sign the deal. And usually when you're not mapping the personas or the people that you're addressing in this way, you kind of get mixed up between the decision-making kind of get mixed up between those two personas. And just putting it out there and just segmenting them and finding their differentiation and noticing that these people are actually using the product or the solution, it creates a very good method for focusing on the right people and on the right solutions that we want to create for them, because it's really valuable for them. So I highly recommend it in case it wasn't clear. Now, the third question is, how would we make sure that we are correct? So we wrote a lot of assumptions and we have like these proto-personas defined and we've got this primary persona that we all thought this is the person that we need to address. Awesome. Eric Rice told it way better than I could ever do. Validate, don't guess. Because everything that we wrote on the proto-persona is an assumption. It's what we think we know. Maybe it's based on conversations that we had. Maybe it's based on our current knowledge about the people that are experiencing the problem. But we need to validate it. We need to make sure that this is actually the case for the end users of the solution that we're trying to solve, to create. So the best way, there are many ways to validate your assumptions. I want to talk to you about the most often or most frequent method that I've heard from people that I've talked to, the initial way that people address a problem and trying to understand whether they have an audience, whether they have a market, and what is the problem that they're trying to solve is through conversations. So I'm going to give you a few tactics to improve the way that you converse with these people so you'll have a less biased opinions given to you, a more objectivity conversation and a more meaningful conversation for your decision-making process. So first one, at least talk to 3 to 5 individuals who you've defined in your proto-persona as the primary proto-persona. If you notice that you have a few of them and there's kind of a competition between one character to another, that's great. 3 to 5 for each proto-persona. That'll give you so much information, valuable information that you can use later on. I also advise, because I noticed that a lot of people do it when they try to talk to people about their solution, is that they explain the solution. And the purpose of gathering information, being divergent thinking and getting information, hearing thoughts, ideas, is to listen and don't try to explain the solution. Now, I have noticed throughout the course of the last year specifically that there has been an increase of usage of AI, and that's brilliant. I used AI a lot in this for this lecture. You can see the wonderful images that you're viewing, and some of the text that I refined with AI. I love using AI tools because it enhances my capabilities for delivering a message. That's brilliant. But I suggest when you use AI, use it mindfully. Don't replace AI with people. I know it seems like an easy, and I've seen it happening, that people, in order to reduce, to save time, to save effort, to get things done really rapidly, they use the AI. But an AI could never replace a person with life experiences and with actual pains that they went through and actual thoughts, ideas, values, goals, motivations. An AI could never replace that. Well, maybe it could in the future. Right now, it can't. I don't think it will ever, it ever could. So to use AI, but use it mindfully for standardized scripts, meaning work with AI tools to create 5 to 7 questions that will help you create a standardized script to create the same conversation with the different people that you're going to talk to. So then later on, you can compare what person number 1 and person number 2 replied for the same question. And then you can compare apples to apples and get valuable insights. And I think one of the most important suggestions that I have for you in your process of trying to understand a complex problem is don't rely on surveys. I know that it's a very easy to use tactical tool. There are so many tools that help us do it. And it's a great method to validate assumptions or to figure out how many people did something. But it really gives us the answers to how much or how many or how frequently, but it doesn't answer the really valuable key points of the why people do things. And when we want to solve a problem for people, we want to understand their why. We want to figure out what would make them come into the solution, what would keep them in the solution, and what would make them feel satisfied by the solution. And that information you can only get by talking to people and asking them the questions and getting their thoughts. So these are just like really high level tactics. And I've actually written an article that is not for UX people, but it utilizes UX tactics that I use and other researchers use. So if you want, you are more than welcome to scan the barcode and go into the website, check out the article, and even download this free PDF without registration or anything, and just see the examples for the questions, the do's and don'ts for writing questions, and creating a very meaningful and valuable script that will help you gain insights. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've learned tools that will help us answer a few questions when we want to tackle, untangle, and solve for people a very complex problem, like who are we solving this to, what do we think we know about them, and how to validate our assumptions. Now let's talk about what exactly is it that we're solving. And remember I told you about the lighthouse effect? This is the moment after I've gathered all the knowledge that I want. Who are the people? Who are the primary people? What do they need, or what do I think they need? And I validated it. Then I can write a proper problem statement and say, this is what we're going to solve. This is what we're tackling. And this is the way that's going to guide us throughout the process. And the reason why I love using the lighthouse metaphor is because creating solutions for a very complex problem is kind of like drifting off in a very turbulent sea. When you have that light from the lighthouse, it doesn't matter if the boat kind of drifts off to different directions, it can always lead you back to the right direction or general direction with the light. So how are you going to do it? So I highly recommend using the How Might We framework. It's really easy to use. And I'm going to show you briefly a few ways to address that framework or use it or utilize it. The first one is the one that you've already been introduced to. How might we, in a very kind of generic kind of way, how might we do something different to get something better? So for example, what we talked about for the airport lines, how might we reduce wait times at the airport to provide better experience? Very generic. The second one is a bit more people-centered and a bit more mid-level. How might we enable a persona from the people that we've defined with a need from what we've talked to them and we found out? How do we help them with the need in a way that to do something to accomplish a goal? So for example, how would we enable Emma, our traveling CEO, with avoiding being delayed for long lines so she can get to her flight on time? And the third one and last one is the specific and more detailed. How might we create what helps whom, at where, and why? So it would look a bit like this. Create a VIP check-in service. That's when we have a more detailed or specific solution in mind that helps Emma, our persona, at the airport VIP's lounge where we think we would place the solution so we can avoid lines, etc., etc. So these frameworks, and here I invite you kindly to take a picture, take a screenshot. These frameworks they're not bulletproof. There's no silver lining for any of the methods that I taught you today, because there is no silver lining for solving complex problem. There's no one method fits all, one tool fits all. You have to play around with them and test and try to see what fits you best. So that's why I decided to bring you 3 options for How Might We, and play around with them, see what works best for you, and decide later on if it's a good fit, or if you want to change it, you can. Because at the end of the day, the way I see complex problem solving is that you need to have a toolbox. You need to have a divergent and convergent way of thinking and human-centered thinking. And you need to have the tools that answer what you're solving, who are you solving this for, and how you can validate your assumptions towards the solution so you can know exactly what we are solving. And always remember to start with the people. And with your permission, I want to wrap this up with a minute of a personal note. I pray for all greed that drives wars all over the world to end, so that the beautiful children that you saw at the beginning of this presentation will have a really good quality of life. And the same goes for every human being around the world, that we would just have peaceful living. And part of what I do, everything I do of facilitating, promoting, talking about being human-centered, it's not a job, it's not a profession, it's not an occupation, it's my mission to make people more empathic to other people and solve problems through that lens. And I invite you to join me, because at the end of the day, I think we're all here because we all want to make the world a little bit better, right? Thank you very much.
Sivana, thank you so much for that enlightening presentation. Highly appreciate it. And now what we can do is open for Q&A. So if anyone wants to either send their question to the message to the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask Sivana directly. Alice, did you have a question?
No, thank you. It was just great.
Perfect. Anyone else have a question for Sivana?
I'm really curious to know if you had one thing that you would take from this lecture, what would it be? Anyone would like to share that with us?
The proto personas.
Yeah, you think you'd use it?
Yes.
Thank you for sharing, Alice.
I personally, I liked your tools and, when you're talking about AI, you know, it's everywhere. Our kids are using AI and ChatGPT 5 and everything, and, I think using it mindfully and understanding that it does not replace people, is very important, and, it should be a tool, not our main resource, basically. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. It's a crazy tool and it really enhances our capabilities, but it should be treated as such and not as a replacement for. I really believe that.
I do too. I do too. Well, I'll give one last chance before we close. If anyone has any final questions or comments.
Thank you, Amy.
Excellent. Well, on that note, Sivana, on behalf of Paul Mirage and the Mirage Institute, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and enlightening our Mirage tribe. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.